All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is absolutely one of the most dramatic, frankly, mind-blowing comeback stories in all of modern tech. We're looking at the incredible journey of NVIDIA and its founder, Jensen Huang. And look, this isn't just a story about silicon chips or stock market graphs. It's a total masterclass in resilience, having a clear vision and surviving against completely impossible odds.
$4 trillion. Let that number sink in for a second. It's almost hard to wrap your head around, right? Today, NVIDIA's GPUs are quite literally the engines powering the biggest tech giants in the world. Google, OpenAI, Microsoft. But to truly understand how they reached this $4 trillion mountain peak, we have to look at the absolute bottom. We have to contrast this modern tech empire with the harsh reality of a 10-year-old immigrant boy who literally spent his days cleaning school toilets and dealing with relentless bullies.
Section 1. The Reform School Years. So Jensen Huang was born in Taiwan, and his family eventually moved to Thailand. But back in 1973, things were politically unstable there, so his parents made the tough call to send 10-year-old Jensen and his brother over to the United States for safety. Now, here's where it gets wild. His uncle actually made a mistake and enrolled him in a boarding school in Kentucky that turned out to be, get this, a juvenile reform school for kids with severe discipline issues. The rules there were brutal. Jensen had to clean the school's toilets every single day, while his brother worked in a tobacco farm. He faced heavy bullying, mostly from kids mocking his English. It was a terrifying ordeal that lasted over a year before he finally reunited with his parents in Oregon. And the grit didn't stop there. To pay his college tuition later on, he worked at a Denny's, washing dishes, wiping down tables, basically doing whatever it took to survive.
You know, that relentless work ethic really carried him. He pushed through an electrical engineering degree at Oregon State, did stints at AMD and LSI Logic, and that leads us to a massive defining moment. April 5th, 1993. Jensen, along with two brilliant engineers, Chris Malakaskawi and Curtis Priam, founded NVIDIA. Their shared vision was incredibly ambitious for the time. They wanted to take ordinary, boring computers and transform them into powerful graphics machines. They clearly saw the future of 3D graphics, and they wanted to be the ones to build the engine for it.
Section 2. 30 days from bankruptcy.
Jump to 1995. The young startup launches its very first graphics chip, the NV1. On paper, an absolute beast. But in reality, it had a fatal, near-company-ending technical flaw. See, NVIDIA built their entire chip around a curved rendering design. But the rest of the industry, especially game developers and Microsoft with their new DirectX software, they'd all just decided that triangles were going to be the universal standard for 3D graphics. NVIDIA bet the house on curves, right when the whole world agreed on triangles. And honestly, the result was a catastrophe.
To put that disaster into perspective, out of 250,000 NV1 chips manufactured, they only managed to sell about 29,000 of them. It was a complete and total market rejection. The company was just hemorrhaging cash. In fact, at one point, NVIDIA was exactly 30 days away from going totally bankrupt, just 30 days away from being another forgotten footnote in tech history. So you're probably wondering, how on earth did they survive that? Well, they got a miracle. The gaming company Sega had actually contracted NVIDIA to build an advanced GPU for their upcoming Dreamcast console. Eventually, Sega realized NVIDIA's approach just wasn't going to work and had to cancel the project. But, and this is a decision that quite literally altered tech history, Sega still paid NVIDIA in full for the canceled contract. That sudden, unexpected cash injection gave Jensen just enough runway to keep the lights on for a few more critical months and completely rethink their entire strategy.
Section 3. The GPU revolution begins.
And rethink they did. In 1997, they dropped the Riva 128. They finally ditched the curves, fully embraced the industry triangle standards, and built an absolute powerhouse of a chip. It was a massive hit, selling 1 million units in just 4 months. NVIDIA was officially back in the game. But 1999, that's where history was really made. They launched the GeForce 256, and they officially coined a brand new term, the GPU, or Graphics Processing Unit. They weren't just participating in the gaming industry anymore, they were completely revolutionizing it from the ground up.
Section 4. The billion-dollar bet. Okay, fast forward to 2006. NVIDIA launches something called CUDA. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. Before CUDA, a graphics card basically only knew how to process graphics for your monitor. That was it. But CUDA was this revolutionary software layer that allowed programmers to use the immense parallel processing power of a GPU for general computing. Suddenly, these chips could calculate complex math, physics, data,
not just pixels on a screen. Now, at the time, Wall Street didn't care. Gamers definitely didn't care. But Jensen quietly, almost secretly, laid the exact foundation for the entire artificial intelligence revolution.
And in 2012, that foundation caught fire. Researchers over at Toronto University were trying to train a groundbreaking new AI vision model called AlexNet. The problem was, traditional CPUs were just way too slow. So they decided to try using NVIDIA's GPUs, tapping into that CUDA technology. And it worked perfectly. The AI learned at unprecedented speeds. Basically overnight, the entire tech world had this massive light bulb moment. The exact hardware required to build true artificial intelligence had been hiding inside PC gaming rigs this whole time. NVIDIA's GPUs were the perfect engines for AI.
Skip ahead to 2023 and 2024, and demand absolutely explodes. OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, they all wake up locked in this intense AI arms race, and every single one of them desperately needs massive amounts of computing power. And guess who was the only one selling the picks and shovels for this digital gold rush? Yep, NVIDIA. This completely insatiable corporate demand skyrocketed NVIDIA's valuation past $1, then $2, and then $3 trillion. At this point, they seemed completely invincible, right? The undisputed kings of the modern tech era. But it makes you wonder, what could possibly stop a $3 trillion giant? Because, just when you think a company has achieved unshakable dominance, the market always finds a way to test them. Section 5, the $4 trillion comeback. Seemingly out of nowhere, a competitor named DeepSeek launched their R1 model. And they made a really shocking claim. They said they'd figured out how to train highly capable AI models at an ultra-low cost, using just a tiny fraction of the usual compute power. Well, the market went into an absolute frenzy. Investors totally panicked. They were terrified that NVIDIA's massively expensive GPUs were suddenly going to become obsolete overnight. The logic was, hey, if you don't need massive compute to train AI, you don't need NVIDIA. The fallout was brutal. $500 billion. In a single day, NVIDIA's stock dropped nearly 17%. Over $500 billion of value was just entirely wiped out. It went down in history as one of the biggest single-day losses in the entire history of the U.S. stock market. Honestly, it felt like the NV1 disaster all over again, just on a massive global scale. But then, the panic started to fade. As the dust settled, tech experts and the broader market came to a pretty swift realization. While software optimization is great, the ceiling for artificial intelligence is practically infinite. As these AI models get smarter, they have to handle way more complex tasks, serving billions of users all at the exact same time. So the demand for massive computing power wasn't actually shrinking at all, it was just evolving. The world still unconditionally requires NVIDIA's hardware to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And because of that realization, the recovery was just as spectacular as the fall. In a matter of months, NVIDIA completely erased those historic losses, surged right past their previous all-time highs, and brought us to our present day in 2026. A brand new, unprecedented valuation surpassing $4 trillion. Which brings us to a really powerful final thought. Our struggle today can become the foundation of tomorrow's success. When you look back at the entire NVIDIA story, from that 30-day death watch back in 1995, all the way to a massive $500 billion stock crash, they never stopped iterating. They never gave up the fight. That 10-year-old boy cleaning toilets in a reform school and the CEO of a $4 trillion empire, they are bound together by that one single truth: absolute resilience. So what challenges are you facing today that might just be building your foundation for tomorrow? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and we'll chat you next time.